I want to close with 3 separate quotes from 3 of our founding fathers. The first comes from John Jay. Recall that he was appointed by George Washington as the original Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. He was also a President of Congress during the Revolution, and he's considered one of the 3 men most responsible for us having the Constitution today. That is, he was one of 3 individuals who, through his writings in the Federalist Papers, convinced America to ratify the Constitution. What did John Jay have to say about the Bible? He declared,
"The Bible is the best of all books, for it is the Word of God, and teaches us the way to be happy in this world and in the next. Continue therefore to read it and to regulate your life by its precepts."
Good advice for us today. The second quote comes from John Adams. John Adams is one of the most distinguished of the Founding Fathers, signing the Declaration of Independence and then the peace treaty with Great Britain that established America as an independent nation. He was also one of only 2 individuals who signed the Bill of Rights, and he became the nation's first vice president and its second president. John Adams was a prominent lawmaker in America and a distinguished attorney. What was John Adams' view of the influence of the Bible on a society? He gave his answer by describing what would happen if an imaginary, hypothetical nation were to adopt the Bible as its guidebook. He predicted,
"Suppose a nation in some distant region should take the Bible for their only law book, and every member should regulate his conduct by the precepts there exhibited. What a utopia! What a paradise would this region be!"
John Adams believed that any nation that took the Bible and not only read it but also applied it and lived by it would become a genuine paradise. He believed the Bible could make that much of a difference in a nation. Noah Webster supplies the final quote, and it comes from this work, The History of the United States, a very popular history and government text written by Webster in 1832 for the use of our schools. In this school book, Webster did not hesitate to acknowledge the important role that the Bible had played in the establishment of America. He told students,
"The brief exposition of the Constitution of the United States will unfold to young persons the principles of Republican government, and our citizens should early understand that the genuine source of correct Republican principles is the Bible."
But Noah Webster reminded students not just of the biblical origins of the Constitution and the principles on which our government was formed, but also of how important it was to America that our citizens should follow the precepts of the Bible. He told them,
"The moral principles and precepts contained in the Scriptures ought to form the basis of all of our civil constitutions and laws. All of the miseries and evils which men suffer from vice, crime, ambition, injustice, oppression, slavery, and war proceed from them despising or neglecting the precepts contained in the Bible."
In other words, according to Noah Webster, not only was the Bible the basis of government in America, but if we would just get into the Bible, obey it, and live by it, we would have a society free from vice, crime, ambition, oppression, and injustice. The Founding Fathers had a great practice. They would regularly, every year, try to read through the Bible from cover to cover once a year. Now, Christians have a tendency not to do that.
Right.
I was talking to a friend of mine recently who teaches a Sunday school class, and he wanted to see how many of us have read through the Bible. And so he polled among this adult class, and he said, "All right, let's count how many adult years we have among us." So if I'm 40, let's say that's 20 adult years. So they had a total of 365 adult years among all of them. And the Bible had been read a total of 7 times out of all of those 365 adult years, and more than half of them were from the teacher of the class. So essentially you have a class full of Christians who have never read the Bible from cover to cover anywhere in their lifetime, much less once a year. Now, you had people like John Jay, you had people like Benjamin Rush, you had people like John Quincy Adams, people like Elias Boudinot, etc., who read through the Bible once every year. And they did it not as a devotional book, but they did it for purpose. John Quincy Adams said that when he read the Bible through once a year, he was looking for things to apply in his life. We have so many businessmen with whom we've spoken said the source of their success is they took the book of Proverbs and read a chapter a day. So you go through the 31 chapters of Proverbs, they were reading a chapter a day for whatever the day, and they read it for years, and it revolutionized the way they conducted their own business, led to success. It's a book filled with wisdom. Spiritual wisdom, sure, but it's also wisdom in business, wisdom in relations, wisdom in everything else. And so we need to get back into reading the Bible that way, as a very practical application book. Elias Boudinot, great founding father, President of Congress during the Revolution, one of the framers of the Bill of Rights. He's the first attorney admitted to the Supreme Court bar. He's a judge, great guy. He says, if you want a good history book, go to the Bible. If you want a very entertaining read, go to the Bible. If you think you're really smart, go to the Bible. If you think you're really ignorant, go to the Bible. He said, whatever you need, go to the Bible. And that's the viewpoint we had in American history. And so we have to get back to the point where that we as a people look at the Bible not as a narrow, limited little spiritual book,
right,
but as a guidebook for life and for living. That we start reading it with a view for application. What does this mean for my community? What can I apply out of this? What does this mean to my character? It's all the answers. It has all the answers. And we need to go back and study success. We love success in America. We want to study success. We'll study some of the guys that were successful. And when you do, you'll see them point to the Bible. So it's time for Americans to get reintroduced to the Bible, not from a narrow viewpoint that we've had in the last generation, but from the very broad historical viewpoint where that this shapes not only your destiny in the world to come, this shapes your culture right now, today.
For more information on the American Heritage Series, or to find books and other resources, visit wallbuilders.com. Through the American Heritage Series, renowned historian David Barton communicates our nation's forgotten, godly foundations and encourages us to once again view history through a truthful lens. For only when we recognize and embrace God's hand in our history can America become all that it was intended to be. Through Wall Builders, historian David Barton seeks to rebuild the walls of America's unique religious, moral, and constitutional heritage by educating the public and encouraging people of faith to become active in strengthening America's great foundations. For more information on how you can become involved, visit wallbuilders.com.